Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you guys. Thank you for the work that you do on behalf of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and United Church of Christ. Let me just thank the United Methodists in the state of Texas for your strong voice for social justice and good in our world. However, among the many problems in the world, there is a problem in Texas. Payday lending is a problem in Texas. There is a loophole in Texas law. There are lots of loopholes in Texas laws. There is one in particular in Texas law that allows payday lenders to operate as credit service organizations. Several years ago, the state legislature created these CSOs, these credit service organizations, in the very best spirit, saying, can nonprofits go out and help people redo their credit? If they've gotten way in over their head, can these CSOs help those people? Which is a very noble cause. And some legitimate, very good CSOs operate in the state of Texas, helping people figure out their credit and get out of debt. However, payday lenders, these not-for-profit organizations, these very much for-profit organizations, organize themselves as CSOs. Credit service organizations in the state of Texas may charge fees of any amount when they loan someone money. A CSO can loan you money and charge you any fee that they choose. They may charge any amount of interest that they choose, and no state agency regulates them. Which means all those payday lenders that you see operating in Amarillo and Marshall and Waco and El Paso, can charge any amount of interest and fees that they want, and there's no one in the state of Texas regulating them. I'm going to say, my 10-year-old son was going to come click the PowerPoint for me, but he got an invitation to go play with a friend. So, Aaron, you're my 10-year-old son this afternoon. I'm sorry. So, click, Benjamin. Payday lenders, through their advertising practices, through the people they want as customers, target senior adults, they target women, they target racial minorities, and they target members of the military. So let me give you an example. I want you to meet Trish, if you'll click to the next screen. Trish is a made-up person, but that's going to be what she looks like today. Let's say that Trish is a single mom. Money is tight for everybody. Money is tight for her, and she has car trouble there, and she's got her 2 kids, and she's trying to figure out what to do. She takes her car to the shop, and let's say that she needs $300, which is not much, except that Trish doesn't have $300, okay? Payday hasn't rolled around, and so she needs $300, and so click, Trish goes to a payday lender to get a $300 loan. Simple enough, right? So what she does is she writes them a check. She writes them a check for $361.06. The $300 is the amount of the loan, okay? That's the principal on the loan. The interest is only $1.06. What a bargain, right? $1.06 on $300. And they throw in a $60 service fee just because they can. The payday lender is so kind and says to Trish, I will not cash your check for 2 weeks. You're going to get paid in 2 weeks, and so I will hold on to this check, and then when you have the $361.06, you come see me and we'll call it a deal. So the next payday, Trish has some options. She can pay off the full amount of the $361.06. If she doesn't have $361, she cannot pay it off in installments. This is not how that kind of loan works. You pay off the whole thing or you pay off nothing. So she has to pay it in full, the full $361.06. Now, if she can't pay it in full, they've got her check that she post-dated and gave to them. They can cash the check, which means she will incur fees at her bank, of course, because she's going to write a hot check, let's say. And she still owes them the $361.06, so there are going to be penalties and fees from both the bank and the lender. But she doesn't have the $361 because she's a single mom and times are still tight, and she didn't have it 2 weeks ago, and she doesn't have it now, and that's what happens. So in order to avoid these penalties, she just pays another $60 fee and the loan rolls over. And so in 2 more weeks, she has 2 more weeks to pay off the entire original amount plus $60 more. This rollover fee must be paid every 2 weeks if she can't afford to pay off the full loan, the fees, and the interest. There is no limit to the number of times that the loan can be rolled over. It can go on and on and on. If the loan was paid off after just one rollover, a month after Trish initially borrowed the money, if she just kept that loan for a month, it would cost her $421.06. That's $121 in fees and interest in 4 weeks, something like 40%. 40% on a $300 loan. Right now in Texas, in 2006 rather, in Texas, there were 1,279 of these CSOs. This year, 4 years later, there are 3,594 of them. There are more payday lenders than there are McDonald's and Whataburger combined. Any of you from Corsicana, by any chance? I grew up in Longview, and so at Christmas, we drive up 31 to go see my parents in Longview. And Christmas, we were driving through Corsicana. There's nothing like Corsicana to drive through because you have to stop at every blooming red light in town, by the way. From one end of Corsicana to the other, I think I counted 6 payday lenders just right there on the main street in Corsicana. I counted 5 on the interstate coming from our house in North Austin down here today that I could see in the middle of traffic. So these things are growing great guns. As Methodists, I'm not a Methodist, but I'm going to tell you that you as Methodists and we all as Christians have a responsibility. This is not just a social issue. This is not just a state government issue. I'm going to be so bold as to pull out my preacher voice, if that's okay, Randy, and say this is a faith issue. This is a Christian issue. Words here from the Bible, of all places. From the book of Exodus, chapter 22, if you lend money to my people, and this is God speaking, if you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you shall not deal with them as a creditor. You shall not exact interest from them. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you. There are a lot of things in the book of Exodus that we don't pay attention to. We're not going to worry about shellfish or where you grow one type of seed versus another, those kind of things. But there are some things in there that are worth paying attention to. And this is one of those that's pretty clear and pretty current and pretty relevant. If you'll click to the next screen, words from Deuteronomy. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release of debts, and this is the form of the release. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Now, if we did that, the world would change dramatically. I don't expect us to enact that as policy this legislative session or any other. However, when you put it just in the context of this one simple issue of payday lending, it's worth thinking about. If you click to the next verse, one from the Psalms and one from the Proverbs, it is well with the man, and I would say as well with the woman, who deals generously and lends, who conducts her affairs with justice. And I don't think that payday lending is dealing generously, and I don't think it's conducting affairs with justice. Although it is worth going to look at one of the payday lender sites. I hesitate to do this. I'm not going to tell you which one. There are only 2 big ones that operate in the state of Texas. Go look at one of those companies' websites, and you'll find it when you know it. Look down at their mission statement, their values, their vision. You know, corporations have these. They talk about servant leadership. They talk about caring for the least among us. Any of your churches would be happy to have that as a mission statement, I promise you. The problem is they're charging 100, 200, 300% interest on these loans. From Proverbs 19, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and God will repay him or her for her deeds. Another take on economics, if you'll click to the next. Another take on economics and lending and borrowing, the words of Jesus from the Gospel of Matthew. Give, not loan, just flat out give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. It's bad enough if you're just a regular banker. It's really bad if you're a payday lender. Click one more screen for me there from the Gospel of Luke. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners. It's a great line. It's a great line. Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again, but love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting nothing in return. Love your enemies is a great sermon, right? very rarely do we put it in the context of lending and borrowing, but that's where Jesus put it. Love your enemies and lend expecting nothing in return. So those are some words from the Hebrew Scriptures and from the Gospels. And now to the person you really want to hear from.
When are we going to get to him?
John Wesley. He'll tell you exactly what to do. I'm from a denomination our church is affiliated with two denominations, and neither one of them have any real clear sort of founders. The disciples, there's Barton Stone and Alexander Campbell, and another guy with the great name of Raccoon John Smith, but it's just not the same. The Methodists and the Presbyterians, you can always go back to Wesley and to Knox, and it just makes it so much crisper. I ran across this little story, or there's this part of a book, The Life of John Wesley by someone named John Telford. I don't know who Telford is, but he was describing a little bit about Wesley, and he said, as a social reformer, Wesley was far in advance of his time. He provided work for the deserving poor, supplied them with clothes and food in seasons of special distress. The profits on his cheap books enabled him to give away as much as £1,400 a year. He established a lending stock to help struggling businessmen and did much to relieve debtors who had been thrown into prison. And so I ran across this, and you're experts on Wesley. I didn't know what a lending stock was, but it occurred to me that it would be interesting to see how he did that and how much interest he charged. And so thanks to the internet, I clicked around a little bit, and this is what I found out. Wesley did not charge interest. Wesley did not charge interest, which is probably a good word to say to payday lenders. So, click one more, back to the fact that we have a problem. The problem is these unregulated lenders are charging huge amounts of interest in the state of Texas. There are more and more of these lenders all the time. As I said, they're targeting women, senior adults, racial minorities, and military personnel. Let me parenthetically say on the issue of military personnel, the federal government at the federal level has passed legislation that the Pentagon requested, saying, please do not let these people loan to our military personnel and to their dependents. That legislation has passed. It is not enforced in Texas necessarily, and in lots of places, but that legislation is on the books, and so this is one of those issues that has broad-based support from all corners of the country. Holly Petraeus, is that her? General Petraeus' wife has taken this on as an issue nationwide. She was in Texas just recently with Elizabeth Warren to talk about this and other issues. So even though they target military personnel, they should not do that. The federal government, at the request of the Pentagon, has passed this legislation saying do not do this.
Tim, tell them about driving around the posts. In San Antonio or Killeen or any of them.
Sure. Yeah.
Every corner.
My in-laws live in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is where Fort Sill is. And Fort Sill thrives on pawn shops and payday lenders. They're right outside the gates, right outside the posts of these things. Now, what's interesting is this is just crazy. Right now, these places are charging about 100, sometimes 200, 300, 400, 500% interest. Okay. If you can get the interest rate down, if you can say you can only charge 75% interest, they go out of business. If you get it lower than 100% interest, they'll pack up and move because they can't make money, which shows you the huge amount of interest that they're charging. Click onto the next screen. So about this problem, the Christian scriptures, as we've said, have some things to say about lending. We should not charge interest to poor people according to the scriptures. We should forgive loans. We should be generous and just. We should lend expecting nothing in return. And click to the next screen. Even Wesley had an example, an answer for the problem. So what do we do is the next screen. Legislation has been introduced by Senator Wendy Davis in the Senate. Representative Craddock in the House is the sponsor of that legislation there to end this practice. One of the things it does too, and I haven't even touched on this, auto title lending is the same thing. People go in, they take the title to their car, they get a quick loan, they can't pay it back, and before too long they've lost their car, their truck, whatever, which very often in the state of Texas means you lose your job too because you can't get there. So auto title lending, payday lending, and this enforcement of not having these type of lenders near military bases are all lumped together in this legislation. It's pretty straightforward legislation, though. It just deals with these three issues. It's legislation that will not cost the state of Texas a dime, which I think is important these days. So this legislation is in the works. What can you do? At Texas Faith for Fair Lending, you can sign the online petition. You need to go to texasfaithforfairlending.org. There is a place on there. There are two petitions. One is for your congregation or any kind of governing board or a Sunday school class or any type of group at your church to sign the congregational petition or the group petition. And then there's also an individual petition that you can sign, and you can get 25 of your closest friends to sign. Texas Faith for Fair Lending is a coalition of the Christian Life Commission of the Texas Baptist, Texas Impact, and the Texas Catholics working together, working very closely with another campaign, secular for lack of a better term. If we're the sacred campaign to end this, they're the secular. But Texas Appleseed, the Center for Public Policy Priorities, and several other groups, along with these same groups from Texas Faith for Fair Lending, working on the same thing. That campaign is called 400% Interest is Wrong. So 400% interest is wrong, and Texas Faith for Fair Lending, it's the same people, just in different configurations working toward the same goals. Postcards. In the back of your binder, I knocked one of you down and stole your postcards. No. In the back of your binder, there is a half-page manila envelope that says Texas Faith for Fair Lending, and you will see in there a flyer that explains sort of what I have talked about here, and you will see several postcards that say close the loophole on predatory lending. That's what we're talking about here, predatory lending. You sign it, you put your address on it, and you drop it in the mail after you put a stamp on it.
Or, if you prefer, you can take it to your unit meeting and have all the people in your unit sign it and put it back in the envelope and mail it to us. And are these, let me just double check. These happen to be stamped for the number of postcards that are in them. If you get more postcards, you're gonna have to add some postage, but we've got you covered for as many as are in there.
So how many of you are going to do that? Excellent. Because I just want you to know I grew up a Baptist, and we'll close every eye and bow every head and sing all the stanzas of Just As I Am till you do it. Is there a deadline for doing this, B?
There is not a deadline, but it would really help if you can get these in within, let's say, a month or 6 weeks. We're going to want at some point during probably March to be able to take a big wheelbarrow full of these postcards over.
Tell them March 15th.
About March 15th would be
March 15th.
That's right.
Josh and I talked about it, and we probably need to set that as March 1.
Oh, March 1. March 1.
There's one greater problem. There's one larger problem, and if anyone can fix this problem, it is the United Methodist Women. The problem is, and this is the real problem, people need money. That example of the woman Trish, I may have made her up and found a picture on the internet, but there are plenty of single moms who can't pay the $300 bill for their car repair. They have to choose between that and their food and their children's daycare or something like that. And so we have a problem beyond payday lending. And one of the things that people in support of payday lending say, and there's some legitimacy to it, is that, well, we're just meeting a need because people need money. And that is true. That is true. And so there are bigger things that you need to do. Fill out 10,000 postcards to start with, okay? But we need to educate people about debt and about money. And churches can do that as well as anyone else. So education about debt and about money is extremely, extremely important. The other thing is considering ways that alternative lending options can come to be. There are a few places in Texas that are doing that. Just in sort of running around on the internet, I found a couple of places in the Methodist tradition that are doing that. Corey United Methodist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, has established their own credit union as a congregation. John Wesley AME Zion Church, not exactly United Methodist tradition, but certainly in your larger family in D.C., has established a credit union as a part of their church. That's big time. That is a lot of work. But there are people in the state of Texas, people in your cities, and people in your congregations who need access to cash in some kind of legitimate, straightforward, low-interest kind of way. And so if you can do that, you will have done something. So think about ways to educate the people in your communities and in your congregations about debt and about money, and think about the alternative lending possibilities that the state of Texas needs. And now the screen for questions.
Is that Cleveland, Texas?
Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio. But if anyone's from Cleveland, Texas, do it there too. One more slide. Take you back to your Anglican roots, you good Methodists. Church of England has some wonderful liturgical resources that are very contemporary and very relevant. This is a prayer for those living with debt. I don't know if you all can see that or not. Maybe in the back the letters are a little small, but if you can see that, join me, if you will, in this prayer for those living with debt. God of power, you are strong to save, and you never fail those who trust in you. Keep under your protection all who suffer as a result of debt. Help them through their time of darkness. Give wisdom to all who seek to help, and bring them to know true freedom in your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.